thank you so much that you find time in the framework on our project, City as a Classroom. Professor Andres, the first question is a generally one, since our audience is very broad. Would you mind please describing in simple words what is the difference between post-pandemic urbanism and the new urbanism?
Well, the new urbanism is a hybrid that theoretically is non-ideological, and it takes whatever works best from the traditional city and whatever works best from the modern city, which is normally understood as a city that is automobile oriented. You know, we're not one of these people that are traditionalists in the sense of that the nostalgic city is always better in every way. It's better in some ways. And then the cities that accommodate the automobiles are bad in some ways, but good in others. Now, this pragmatism of non-ideology is very rare. It's rare, it's very rare in Europe, you know, where people are just rabid traditionalists or rabid modernists, but it is not so rare in America. Okay, here we're pragmatics. So the new urbanism literally at its best combined a city in which the automobile is accommodated, but is not mandatory. You see, so you do have a car, you can use it in bad weather or to take a small child, but you don't have to, okay? There's a main street that is a traditional main street, but it is managed like a shopping mall. It is centrally managed so that it operates in an optimal way in terms of the diversity of goods, in terms of its safety and cleanliness. So there's a traditional main street physically, but actually modern management. The houses obviously are very up to date. You know, there's no living in an old bathtub with legs on it. You know, the little legs, you know, you get a good bathtub, you get a good kitchen, but the spatial quality, the quality of the space, maybe as in a traditional building, you see? Mm-hmm. So it's very eclectic, but it's not a decorative attitude, and it is not a radical attitude, it's a pragmatic attitude, okay? Now, because the new urbanism formally is 30 or so years old, with tremendous successes. You know, for example, our firm probably has about 45 new towns under construction, you know, and in Europe, in England, and so forth. And there are conferences that are attended every year by 1,500 people. We have 3,500 members. Many hundreds of cities use our codes, you know, the new urbanist codes. So I would say that we have become the paradigm. As we became the paradigm, we also became dogmatic, okay? And the old radical new urbanists first developed doctrine in order to spread. But I would say that at this moment, we are dogmatists in the sense that we have often been accused of. We've been accused of being dogmatic. No, that there's only one way to do things. And I would say that in fact, that accusation has finally come true. It has not been true before. And that is what, that willful misunderstanding is what cleared the field for our operation. The academy ignored us. They said, oh no, we don't want to talk to these people. So they left the reality of American planning and building, etc. They left it to us. And we just ran rampant with it, and we became the paradigm. Now, we knew that things have to change because the 21st century is different. And it's a tragic century, okay? And by the way, the first 20 years of the century were just like the 20th century. You know, it's like 1918, you know, the 19th century lasted till 1914. You know, the 18th century lasted till Waterloo, till 1816. The 20th century lasted, depends how you think, it lasted either till 2008 or 2020. Okay, but now it's perfectly clear what the century is going to be like. And we have a series of traumas that are overlapped. Okay, the first one is climate change, and what I would consider the inevitability of reaching the irreversible tipping points. It's very, very hard. People are not behaving. We're going to reach the tipping points, and there will be the many things that are predicted. You know, desertification, fire, flood, etc. Okay, the second thing which came up is the pandemic. Okay, now you can say, well, that's just part of the problem. No, the pandemic is a very specific condition. Okay, and the pandemic, even if it disappears tomorrow, will have scarred, will have affected the culture. The people who survived the Depression, the people who survived the Second World War, that was only 5 years, right? The people who survived communism, it still scars them. It still affects everything the rest of their life. People your age will be affected by the pandemic even if it goes away. But of course, it will not go away because the virus is a permanent condition. It's a very clever virus. It comes back, etc. So we need to account for an urbanism that actually, in which the stranger is dangerous until proven otherwise. Now that brings up a lot of problems for the new urbanism because we like tight spaces, right? We like to meet strangers. We like to take public transit. Do you see what I'm saying? We like to shop in the little stores. Suddenly, a lot of these things are in question. And it's a long list. It's a long list that's in question. Now, in addition to this, there is something coming up, which is essentially that the world is bankrupt, including the United States. We have too many old people, too many pensioners, too many rich people that have stolen everybody's money, okay? I would say that right now I've read that 110 million Americans don't have any savings at all. 110 million in the richest country on earth. Okay, these are not happy people. And when you have 110 million people who have had their wealth redistributed, they cause social instability. The homeless, the people forced to crime, not because they're criminals, but because they have to eat. And then there's the resentful ones, you know, the ones that are angry. Okay, so we have something that in the United States we haven't had for a very long time, which is social instability. So the open city, which is the new urbanist ideal, comes into question. Okay, social instability. And then the last thing is that the coronavirus is really bankrupting the nation. You know, they close all these shops, they don't pay taxes. Some cities have reported that it will take 10 years to recover from the taxes they have already lost. Okay, so there's no money for climate change, there's no money for social services, etc. All of these affect urbanism. There's also a problem with the profession, which is that they're all, you know what a megalomaniac is?
No.
Okay, it's somebody who thinks they're all powerful. Megalomania. The profession demands that everyone be saved everywhere forever. Okay? Not just you and your apartment building, or you and your city, or you and your region, but also Bangladesh, right? And they don't want it just for one generation, they want forever. Let's save the world forever for everybody. That is a huge distortion. It's an absurdity. Okay, not even the greatest dictators, Stalin, Hitler, they couldn't save the world forever for everybody. Okay, not even Jesus Christ could do that. Okay, he couldn't. But planners talk that way. they speak about saving everybody forever. And when you say, no, I'm designing something for people who choose, I'm designing an urbanism for people who choose to live in this proposal, which offers only better days. We're not offering salvation, just you're going to live better days than you would. And you will do it for maybe 1 or 2 generations, just 1 or 2 generations. They get really angry. They said, what do you mean only some people? What do you mean only 2 generations? Well, I think that that's, you know, if you went today and you had a friend and they offered you a good day, you had a great day, you know, from morning to night, a great day, you would think, wow, that was a great day. I love this guy. Well, we're offering this for 2 generations. It seems to me that it's a huge offer. And yet the profession is so insane that they want to go cross-culturally, globally, and until the year 3000. And not only save the people, but save every little animal, you know, walking and crawling around. Okay, that is absolutely dysfunctional. It's a dysfunctional situation. And one cannot operate in an academic environment, such as you might be, that is offering that as the basic thesis. That when somebody actually says, hey, let's limit what we do to just better days for those who choose to live this way for a generation or 2, they say, we disqualify you because you're a horrible person. And I said, no, actually, I'm a practical person. And you, sir, are insane. So you can see how the polemic changes. The new urbanism is always pragmatic. Most urbanists, it is a distortion of the profession that most urbanists are idealistic to the point of absurdity. And that's the problem. And if you were to have a conference that was really post-pandemic, that actually confronted the 21st century in its reality, which is now clear, it's absolutely clear, it's a very, very difficult century, okay? If you were to have that conference, it would be a unique and important conference. But if you allow people to set up a kind of utopian, idealistic thing, you're going to waste your time.
You told that even before, you use, first of all, the dogmatic. How do you think now dogmatic will change? Like,
oh, yes, the new urbanists will change. The new urbanists, yes, we're pragmatic.
What changes, how you think, how it will be looks like now?
The new urbanism?
Yeah, like new dogmatic of even urbanism.
Okay, well, the new urbanism became dogmatic because it became successful. It became a paradigm. But there's a, what's very American is that there's a reform movement within it. In America, we make every mistake, but there's always a reform movement. Other countries don't make so many mistakes, but there's never a reform movement. They keep making exactly the same mistakes generation after generation after generation. Probably your country too, okay? You just keep making the same mistakes. We make all the mistakes, but we also repair them. So we're now in pure repair mode. And the new urbanism is doing a generational change for people who will be in my position in the year 2050. Okay? Midway through the century. Mm-hmm. And it looks different. And what we're looking as models is not the utopian models of the 20th century in which everything worked. We're looking at models from difficult times. Like, for example, when the American West was colonized, you know, by the westward expansion in the 19th century, it was very difficult. This was a harsh continent. Difficult weather, deserts, horrible winters, you know, warriors everywhere. You saw the movies. It's very difficult, okay? Nevertheless, in the second half of the 19th century, just the Mormons, you know, that religious people, just the Mormons alone, between 1850 and 1895, settled 730 successful cities. without money. Okay, so instead of looking at 1920 or 1950, we're looking at 1875. Okay, we're also looking, for example, for genetic material, for example, the kibbutzim. You know, the kibbutz in Israel. Desert, hostile, contentious people, desert, no money. Okay, so we don't look at the American 1920s cute suburbs. We don't look at the cute towns, you know, the pretty towns. Too many urbanists are saying, oh, what a beautiful street, oh, what a beautiful square. No, we're looking at whoever succeeded in difficult conditions. So the catalog from which we extract DNA is totally different. Okay?
Yes.
It's just totally different. And there's a lot of material on this. Okay,
Thank you
for
so
example,
much. Yeah.
You're called expedition,
Yes.
right? Okay. Expeditions are always in difficult times. Okay, so we look at expeditions. How did they survive? That kind of thing. Very lightweight infrastructure. So that is what the proposal is to look at different models, confronting the reality and looking very tight at just looking at all the limits. Exciting again.
You are founder of the Congress for the New Urbanism. Could you share your viewpoint on what post-pandemic urbanism and city planning will look like? Maybe something else. Do you see the necessity to readjust the vision of the Congress in general now?
Yes, we do. Okay. The Congress operated with decision-making at the level of the household. You know, the household had a certain power to decide things. And the next level is the neighborhood. Okay, and then the next level is the city as a whole. And of course, the next level is the state, the next level is the country, the next level is the United Nations. What we find is there's a big jump between the level of the house and the level of the neighborhood. Like, for example, let us say that you want your child to play only with the children of people you trust so they don't get sick. Okay, the neighborhood is much too large. There's too many people you don't know, too many people you can't trust. So the kids get infected and they bring the infection home and they get the old people, right? So we need to have an increment that is much smaller than the neighborhood to decide certain things. Okay, we need an increment in which the household is expanded. It isn't just a house, but a compound. You understand a compound? Maybe 6 buildings. Much more like the old farms, you know, maybe 6 buildings where there's a diversity of older people, younger people, perhaps somebody that can teach the children, perhaps a couple of young men that can protect it, you know, in case there's a problem. So you basically allow that the fundamental increment is not the house, but the compound. Think about 6 buildings, okay? And you get to assemble the compound you need. You get to assemble the society you need, okay? I need me, I need my grandmother, I need somebody to take care of my grandmother, I need somebody to fix the car and lift things, and I need 3 friends or I'm gonna go crazy. So you assemble your compound. And then you assemble 8 compounds with a shared space. And that shared space is available. And now 8 compounds of 6 buildings is almost 50 buildings. That 50 buildings, you can know 50, okay? And then you give them a space where they can act and say, hey, we need a playground, or we need to start a small school, or we need to grow our own vegetables, without going to the neighborhood. See, the neighborhood is too far away. You have to convince too many people to allow you to build a playground or a farm or anything. So what the new post-pandemic urbanism does is it brings down the level of decision-making to increments that don't necessarily exist today. okay? And there's at least two that are added: the compound and the cluster, okay? And that's what we call a circle of trust, because the world out there is very difficult. There are criminals, there are marauders, there's infections, okay? But at the same time, you can't stay just with your family. You need a bigger realm. And so that is what the new urbanism does is it expands the circle of trust. And that's what it mostly looks like. And by the way, because we have so much work, we have been able to design all that already in real projects. So we can actually show images.
Okay, Professor Andres, what do you think? How people's understanding of urban space and urban life will change during this post-pandemic period?
Completely. What used to be valued, which is the intimate space, the intimate street, right? Walking becomes a problem. And the car protects you, and the delivery van protects you, you see? So there's a huge danger of becoming a place of an urbanism in which public space has little value. You see the problem? It's the terrific problem. Public space has little value. So we need to know and I guess that relates to what I said earlier, you can't have public space at the level of the city or at the level, because you can't trust them. You can't go to the beach, you get sick immediately. You can't go to the big convention, you get sick. You can't go to the festival, you get sick, right? So what happens is you need to actually have a much smaller increment, which is delimited, in which the people that you participate are not strangers. You see how different that is? It's hugely different. Okay. By the way, it's not that life is less pleasant. What is unpleasant now is that you only have a house and you go crazy. And then you go to the city, you get sick. That's unpleasant. Having 50 households that you trust and know, that's more friends than you ever need. You can even have enough boyfriends there. So don't worry.
The next question is, if we compare 18th, 19th century and modern approach to the city building, what was different back then in terms of strategy and the end of results? Do you think our ancestors were better than modern urbanists?
Well, there's two things. You can speak about the aesthetics,
also,
which are a disaster now.
Mostly people said this, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the aesthetics first, get it out of the way. Okay. In the old days, people without a visual education, uncultured people, could only act on small objects. You know, the bonnet, the dress, see that little cabinet behind you? That green cabinet? Okay, I mean, that's not gonna hurt anybody because it's a private small thing. And the people who did the big moves were highly educated. There was a coincidence between education and power. And so the architecture was not vulgar, and they had the power to make the avenues straight and have everybody behave to make harmonious cities. With the success of capitalism, many, many people have wealth, but cultural education is not valued in capitalism. Okay, therefore you have a coincidence of great wealth without education, and people can now affect very large objects, whole buildings that are horrendous, as you know very well, because I'm sure all your new buildings in your city are horrible. Okay, these are people who have no education but a lot of money. So that's not coming back. We have to develop a city that is resilient and can tolerate low quality architecture. Look what I'm saying. Okay, somebody builds a big ugly building, it can't destroy your city. You have to have a city that can tolerate that. So that's one big difference. Now, the older cities were interesting because they're more similar to the future than now. For example, most cities were extremely insecure. Okay, at night you walked out, even in early 19th century London, if you walked outdoors at night, you would not survive. You would be assaulted. You would be killed and robbed every night because there were too many poor people, et cetera, okay? People don't know that, they forget that how unsafe the public realm was. When you went from one city to another, let's say in Russia or Italy or whatever, when you're carried, you also have to hire 4 soldiers to protect you. Okay, that difficulty, that kind of difficulty is re-emerging. Okay, so the old cities, for example, their courtyard buildings, their patio buildings, then instead of having the object building, the house as object, which is vulnerable on all sides, you have a courtyard building, such as appear in Italy, such as appear in North Africa, such as appear in Latin America. You can actually have an outdoor space that's completely safe. So the typologies change for safety. Okay, now there's another thing that happens. If you go to Haiti right now, Haiti, it would surprise you how many people are middle class in a complete disaster. I mean, Haiti is an indescribable disaster. And you say, well, how do you live here? And they said, well, we're like a ship. We have our own well, we have our own energy, we have our own sewer, we have our own solar, and we have our own guard. So what happened is they've taken what is normally operates at a larger level and they bring it to the level of the household. And when you turn the tap, you can drink the water because it's their water. And you can turn on the computer because you have a generator or solar. Everywhere else, nothing works. Okay, so what happens is it's too expensive to do it per household, but it is possible to do it per compound. You know, at the level of 6 buildings, and it's possible to do it per cluster. Because you can even hire somebody to operate the machinery that cleans the water and picks up the sun. So what this urbanism like is much more like a ship. You know, now a ship cannot forever disconnect from the land, but for a very long time, a ship is completely self-sustaining. Okay, so the urbanism of the future, you have to know where your food is coming from. What food comes from where? Where's my security coming from? You know, and I'm not talking about the army. The army's up there at a high level, but maybe I have somebody at night that walks the block. I pay a person to just walk around the block. Doesn't even have to be armed. Just somebody out there is all you need. You see what I'm saying? And so those are all old systems from difficult times. That's what it was like in the beginning of the 19th century. The beginning of the 19th century was exactly like that. And in the West, in the American West, the second half of the 19th century was like that. You saw the pictures. I mean, people were killing each other in the late 19th century. You know, some of those massacres that you see, Indian and white people massacring each other, was 1885. It wasn't ancient history. It's like my grandfather was there. So all these models that seem ancient are now, they have DNA that works. You know, what is it like? What is an Italian palazzo like? Well, an Italian palazzo is a place that has a piano nobile, which means that the first floor is a wall. You live the second floor above the mess and the danger. But inside that first floor, you have your own shops, your own storage, your own guards, your own horses, everything. You see, so suddenly you look at a palazzo in Italy, and it isn't just a historical artifact. It's something full of lessons. And here's another one that I want to mention. The monasteries removed the religion, which I think was minor anyway, okay? They were vehicles for surviving the Dark Ages. If you could get in a monastery between one thing and another, life was excellent compared to outside. We think of them wrong. We think of them as, oh, that's terrible. The monastery must be awful. It must be boring. No, it was safe and pleasant. So when was the last time somebody studied a monastery? Well, maybe a scholar saying, well, the religious order. No. We have to, as urbanists, we have to say, what's a Carthusian monastery? Like, what was the technology? What was the environmental technology of the self-sufficient Carthusian monastery? What did they do with their free time? What was their work? How did they organize? Of course we're going to bring girls in. It isn't going to be monks. By the way, the monks brought girls in too, so don't even think about that, okay? A monastery was a lifestyle. Yeah, a little religion overlay, a little religion on top, right? So because the singing was better and the discipline was better, but it was a great life. And so what's exciting about me is that at my age, and I had mastered the 20th century, I'd mastered it. I could do anything. I now have to learn all sorts of new things, and it's so exciting. By the way, very few people like what they're hearing. They don't want to hear the bad news. They don't want to hear that we have to in some way start again. They don't like the models. Why are you looking at an American fortification in the West? The little forts that John Wayne was, Why are you looking at monasteries? Why are you looking at Mormons? They were religious maniacs. Why are you looking at Mormons? Well, because the Mormons set up 730 towns and villages that succeeded with their farming and everything. Not one failed. So I'm not going to be ideological and say, well, I don't like the Mormons because I don't like their religion. No. Just look at their towns. How were they organized? And we know very, very well how they were organized. We have learned that. We're learning monasteries. We're learning kibbutz. It's a different set of models. And by the way, because the academy is so damned ideological about everything, because all of this everything I mentioned was incorrect. Oh, the kibbutz is oppressive. Oh, the monastery is oppressive. Oh, the Mormons are oppressive. Oh, the United States cavalry in the West is oppressive. Because of this crazy ideology of the academy, crazy, they don't even permit themselves to look at models. So again, the field is ours. The field of study is entirely dominated by the pragmatic new urbanists, and the academicians have nothing to do with it.
It is believed that different cities influence us in different ways and teach us on different levels, like example, sociologically, psychologically, psychologically, anthropologically, etc. Yeah. In your viewpoint, in which ways does city planning influence people?
Okay, it always obviously influences people, physically and psychologically, but the purposes have been different. Like, for example, many of the best cities were designed to influence people that the ruler was a great person, and you must respect the great person. The Kremlin, no windows. You see what I'm saying? The Great Avenue, where the army can march down and keep, the rebellions occurred every 50 years. The great avenues are very good for soldiers and for shooting. Yes, you can influence all sorts of things, but the influence has always been different, like what's been attempted. Now, you will notice that you can look at a medieval city that had a purpose, or a Hanseatic city that had a trading purpose, or a city that might have been a military outpost, or a city that might have actually just been for poor people that weren't wanted anywhere. You have a lot of those in Russia. The shuttles and so forth, okay? And yet, they're all still functional for people that are not subjects of the Tsar, that are not poor Jews, that are not military people. So although they're specialized for certain functions, all cities share some general aspects that continue to function despite their original intention. And that's what's interesting. What's interesting is the commonality. Okay, now there's something called the Charter of the New Urbanism, because that charter, which is 27 principles, contains every one, and it has survived for 30 years intact, highly regarded document. It actually contains all the things that are common to all cities. And by the way, it's cross-cultural. You can go to South Africa, you can go to China, you can go to a Western American city, it's common. And that's what's interesting, actually. That central core that actually is simply human. You know, the human, how long does a human walk, you know, to get daily needs, you know, things like that. Like, how does a human feel safe or unsafe so that they come to places? What amuses a human? I mean, part of the problem with the suburbs in America is they're very beautiful, but they're so boring that no one can stand even to walk. So we know how to make them interesting. I mean, I really mean it. I mean, I know exactly how to make them interesting. And that's what we need, is we need that commonality, which is never compromised, that common core that leads to satisfying lives for humans and good economies and ecology. And then the rest has to change continually. Look, they're huge Stalinist cities, huge, all over Russia. I have the books, okay? They're still highly desirable. All those Stalinist apartment buildings, everybody loves them. You know, they're beautiful buildings with good apartments, with high ceilings. They were built for another purpose. But what they did get right is the commonality. The metro in Moscow, okay, it was a communist propaganda machine, right? But it's still fantastic. They got a lot of things right, you know? And that's what's interesting. But you know what's sad? Is that the profession doesn't even know what those things are. They're continually trying to figure out, how do we design a city? How do we make people happy? How do we get them to walk? It's pathetic. Like, if planners were surgeons, they would have killed so many patients that they would be out of business. How can you keep asking kindergarten questions? I mean, you go to conferences that last 3 days about how do we get people to use public space? You know, shepherds, uneducated shepherds knew how to make public spaces that work perfectly today. It's only the professionals who don't know. I mean, the whole profession is in crisis, completely in crisis. It's always trying to start anew. It pretends it knows nothing. And as a result, all the new cities are terrible because they're always done by people who don't think they know what they're doing. When in fact, it's very obvious that which succeeds. Like, even the question that you asked, why are you asking that question? Because all planners always have to ask the question. Ooh, what makes a city nice? Oh, come on, like, why don't you ask a shepherd? The only people who don't know what makes a city nice are the people who went to university to learn how to make cities nice, and then they don't know. It's unbelievable. But it's a megalomaniac profession that wants to save the world everywhere. And it's a profession that actually is not even out of kindergarten. It's in perpetual kindergarten. And there's no time for that luxury anymore. It's over. We have to act quickly, and we have to act massively, and we have to act with certainty. We can't make mistakes anymore because the crisis is coming too fast, and there are too many people.